Well, a very good morning, and it's a great pleasure being with you. And essentially, in this short 18 minutes, what I'm going to attempt to do is share with you what some insights we have into innovation. And actually, I'm sure as all of you are sitting here, it's become a big buzzword, hasn't it? Innovation. And today, the reality is no CEO be dare caught not talking innovation. Everybody talks it, but very few actually manage it. And even fewer have actually managed to institutionalize it into the DNA of an organization. So the question really, I'm sure, that is puzzling all of us is, what makes it so difficult that while so many people aspire it, so few actually manage it? And this is a question that we have kind of struggled with through these very many years. And the one answer which has struck us all this time is, the single word is gravity. Now think about it, that's that one force which pulls down no matter how hard you throw it. And the forces opposing innovation are pretty much the same. And when you think about it, the design of an organization today is still the remnant of the industrial age. While the world has moved on, but the design of the organization has hardly changed. So at the heart of it, what are the key questions and the myths we need to bust in order to mobilize the organization to move is really what I am attempting to share with you today. And the one experience which pulls out the very heart of this dilemma and the possibility is really a story out of Walt Disney's life. You know, one of the very, which has stuck with me through many years, but the very first film that they made that was very successful, an animated venture, was a film about 3 pigs. I'm sure some of you have heard the story or seen the film even. It's a very popular 3 Little Pigs. Now this was very successful. Now, so Walt Disney got a studio together to think about, well, what film should we do next? You can imagine when one genre of film begins to succeed, what would have been the answer? What do you think was the answer? You know, unfortunately for Walt Disney, the answer was the same. So, you know, pigs work. Pigs sell. So, pigs 2. Well, they did pigs 2 and it didn't work very well, and in a very formalized review they concluded the idea was good but the execution was bad. And so, pigs 3. And it went on till pigs 4 actually. Till finally it struck Walt Disney like a bolt of lightning. You can't beat pigs with pigs. You have to do something else. You know, that was such a obvious but a big jolt, and that led to Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. Those of you who know film history, it was the first full-length animated feature film. It actually created the category of animated feature films. It was far bigger than pigs could ever be. It is till date in the Hall of Fame as the biggest grosser, and when you compare it to today, it still remains there. But take a look. It took that key question, right, to break through that. But when you see across the organization, across industry even, what happens over a period? Everybody is busy making pigs. Actually, when you look at it, a whole industry can become an extended pigs factory, and then they call it getting commoditized. But really, there is nothing called a commoditized industry, just commoditized mindsets. Because nobody is asking the Snow White question at all. So when you're faced with such a scenario, you can imagine a CEO's challenges. And the starting point, the first myth we need to bust is it's all about managing innovation. So we have departments being created around managing innovation. We are perhaps solving the wrong problem. Innovation is not the purpose. Innovation is a means. Transformation is the purpose. Once transformation becomes the purpose, innovation is the fuel. Orbit shifting is the purpose, innovation is the means, it's not an end in itself. When we start managing innovation, things go completely awry. So really the challenge for an organization, and the first myth we need to break it, let's not manage innovation, we have to lead orbit shifts. It's not about managing innovation, we have to lead transformation. And when transformation becomes the purpose, innovation becomes the fuel, and it's necessary. So that's really one myth, but the second one, which goes almost along with it, which I'm sure you've seen this story bring alive. We are all seduced with the idea of out-of-the-box thinking. I'm sure you've heard that. You've been also talked about and nudged and prodded to do that. You know, think out of the box, think differently. But the bigger question is, how does one find the box? You know, the trouble is the biggest and the most powerful boxes and the most paralyzing ones are actually the most invisible. recognizing that is the heart of the challenge. And a story brings it very alive, an experience that we had while working with a global corporate. Now they were talking about what do we do to transform and to create the next game changer in laundry. Now while they were talking all this, they also said, all around the world we've done lots of ideation. And we have some 4,000 ideas. I doubt if there's anything left. We thought about everything possible. So rather than respond to that, we just started mapping those ideas to look for boxes. And they were fascinating. They were just 1 or 2 boxes in which all those 4,000 ideas were. Well, unknowingly, it had paralyzed it. And what was the box? Now, in hindsight, you notice all great ideas are very obvious in hindsight. Now, in this case, what had happened was, very unknowingly, just think aloud with me that when you think of laundry, what comes to mind? What's the purpose of laundry? I'm sure instinctively it will be to clean, to remove. Surely, it is to clean, to remove microbial dirt or physical dirt, but it is to remove. So, think about it. Laundry is a post-dirt intervention. The moment this question was framed, you can imagine immediately a blind spot opened up. But why post? What could be done pre-dirt? What about preventing dirt? The whole question opened up that there could be a radically different way of handling this question. And suddenly a whole range of new possibilities opened up. On the other hand, the question was, it's about removing. What could it add? The first thing was stunned. What do you mean it could add dirt? But not really. It could add health. Immediately it followed through. But all these possibilities were striking much later, and when you look back at all those 3,500 ideas, since it was all about post-dirt intervention, you can imagine, those 3,500 ideas were all about cleaning faster, cheaper, better. Unknowingly, that box had maintained, and this was around the world. Doesn't matter what cultural differences were. But this is the paralysis of the box, the invisible box, which had limited them completely. So the starting point is not out-of-the-box thinking, it's finding the boxes. Is actually mapping and breaking through boundaries. And if we do it with the same force as we think of ideation, amazing new possibilities open up. So that's the first myth that needs to be broken, and very closely associated with this is the starting point of an innovation. Now all these years, I'm sure you've heard of a lot of romantic stories around innovation which started with a big idea. And they almost all seem to start there. And therefore the myth which has cultivated it begins with a big breakthrough idea. And after that you have to kind of stage manage it. But what we've discovered is, if you want to do it by design, not by accident, it doesn't start with an out-of-the-box idea, it starts with an out-of-the-box challenge. Taking on a challenge which cannot be done by doing more of the same. Now, when it starts there, then new things begin to happen. And to give you another very interesting illustration of this, another global corporation that we were working with, now this is talking to the category head globally, and he was discussing that, he was in charge of soaps and shampoos globally. For him, the concern was that, water is becoming a stress issue. And our soaps and shampoos consume a lot of water in usage. A lot of water gets wasted. How do we reduce it? Because this is going to become a question. So I asked him, so what is the challenge? He says, even if we can reduce it 25–30%, it would be great. Now, in a little bit of dialogue, what emerged was, this is not an orbit shifting challenge, it was actually incremental. The dialogue took shape, and we were discussing that, if we did it like 25–30%, what did the people do? They say, okay, pre-shampoo, during shampoo, post-shampoo, take out 10% here, 10% here, 10%, done, job done. But that's the classical incremental kind of thinking. And this kind of dialogue, it triggered an out-of-the-box challenge. Well, how about a range without water? Let's start from scratch. How about creating a range which has no water at all? Now that out-of-the-box challenge provoked them to think completely differently, and took just 3 or 4 months to arrive at a full new portfolio. But the starting point had changed. Now all this sounds great, but think about it. In management language, we have something called objective setting. It's called good objectives are what? Challenging but realistic. Now that but realistic is the gravity, which decimates it to doing more of the same. Whereas what is needed is an out-of-the-box challenge, which will, by design, bust the existing box. Cannot be done by doing more of the same. And if you look back, all of the grand innovations that have come actually began with an aspiration which was close to this. The question is, how do we do this by design and not let it happen by incident and accident, which most of these stories actually are about. And the almost follow through to this is that when CEOs talk about expanding markets and growing, innovation for growth is the big story. But the next question always is, well, how do we get new insights into the market? I'm sure you heard the question, right? New insight into the market is very vital. So how do they go about it? Market research. Okay, so a senior guy thinks about it, he'll talk to the next level guy, who will talk to a market research agency, and finally the researcher will be 5 times removed from the person who thought of this idea. And he is going around talking to customers. At the end of it, what they are left with is a grand PPT with thousands of data points. If you're lucky, some useful information, but almost never a breakthrough insight. Over these years, what we found is that such an amazing amount of effort goes into doing incrementally different things. But what is the problem with this process? Now, it is great for incremental improvements, but when it comes to breakthrough, innovation, it falls short. But where does it really fall short? You notice the starting point of a research is a hypothesis. Whereas an innovation is not about, there's no starting with a hypothesis, it's about discovering a new hypothesis. Research is about finding answers to questions, whereas innovation is about finding the next question, which we haven't even thought about so far. So the starting point in itself is fundamentally different. Now, how does one engage with that? And the biggest learning for us over these years is, insight is the one thing which the leadership of an organization cannot outsource to anybody. They need to do it personally, because only they have the capacity to actually ask and discover the next questions. And once the questions have to be discovered, they can be validated. The other big myth is we have to go to consumers and discover unarticulated needs. Of course, that has to be done, but they are not the only source. The challenge is to discover new sources entirely. Who else? Who else understands the consumer but is not a consumer? One very breakthrough insight about watches actually came from not talking to the consumer, but talking about to a spa runner who was providing spa service to those consumers. She understood them far more intimately than we could ever have. And a fascinating new insight came up. Another new insight into wellness actually came from talking to, now hold your breath, a traditional Chinese medicine doctor. It was a completely new insight into how wellness could be conceived occurred from that conversation. And so it's amazing how many new insights can come by joining new dots, but here accidents have to be made to happen by design and not hopefully they will happen. So we have to transform the way we explore markets. Research is great for maintaining, but we have to get into market discovery. Alongside with that, these are some of the key myths, but at the heart of the matter is one fundamental question. Innovation is finally the journey into the unknown. And think about it, our organization design is all about making sure unknown doesn't happen. It's about ensuring certainty. In fact, what we've discovered over these years is that one cultural phenomenon which runs across most organizations is success equals not failing. That almost becomes an ingrained culture. Imagine not failing. So what does it actually translate into? Who are heroes in a risk-averse culture? Heroes are people who are great at under-promising and overachieving. In fact, this becomes an art form. At the beginning of the year, when goals are being set for next year, the hero is the guy who can promise just less than what he believes he can achieve. Now think about it. If we are under-promising, and I am talking about out-of-the-box challenges, unthinkable. He must be nuts to be taking on a challenge like that. But so what's the heart of the matter? It's not the fear of commercial risk, but the fear of personal risk which holds back innovation drives. How does one create a safe environment to create new experiments? Unless that happens, it will remain mere talk. And the other myth that is another fascinating one is to take it beyond ideation merely. Biggest ideas don't just die, they get diluted. In fact, if they died, it may have been easier, but reality is, we've seen biggest ideas don't die, they just get compromised slowly. What looks like a Snow White in a boardroom, by the time it reaches the market, has become a pig. Because at every step, a compromise takes place. And how does this happen? Because the people who came up with the idea were 2 or 3, but in a large organization, they have to depend upon many other functions to come together to execute it. Now, when the execution stage comes up, cross-functional battles take over. What is an exciting opportunity for me is a headache for the other guy. I mean, he's saying, as if I don't have enough problems already, bugger has come up with yet another one. So what does he do? He'll say, well, we can do so much, yeah, the other, well, if you insist it has to be done all the way, it may take another 5 years. Just forget it, at least do what you can do. So 10% compromise, another 5% compromise, one after the other serial compromise, and by the time it reaches the market, it's a pale shadow of its original self. And those of you who've been in the organization, you must have painfully seen this happen very, very frequently. And the heart of the matter is, why does this happen? The starting point really is how an innovation is resourced. By resourced, I don't mean money. That's the easier part. The tougher part is, who are the people leading it? Now, in the one conversation I've seen happen very frequently with senior leadership is up to the point of doing great things, doing orbit shift, they're very excited. The moment the question comes up, so tell me who will do it, then gravity takes over. And then suddenly the conversation changes to, who can we spare? Who can we spare? But the best people are defending today. Only the ones who can be spared are available to create tomorrow. So imagine, the people pursuing the new are spare people in spare time. Spare people in spare time don't create history. It's almost by design dilution. And no wonder it falls away in very, very frequently. And the second big source of dilution is this belief that all the romance around innovation is coming up with a big idea, executing it, anybody can do it. So the thinkers are involved in the creation stage, and then it is handed over to the so-called implementers. And we forget the one critical thing, that as much innovation will be called for in executing the idea as was called for in creating it. In fact, overcoming the execution obstacles will call for as many breakthroughs at virtually every stage. What happens is, a new idea goes into an old pipe and it kills it in the last mile. A new product may need a marketing innovation, a business model innovation in order to succeed. How will that happen? And if you put the whole thing together, the one key question that I'm sure you've heard all the time is, we need to hire new people to make innovation happen. The same people can't do it. Have you heard that? This is another myth, and I'm calling it a myth. Because this idea of calling it superheroes and making great things happen is easily talked about. But in reality, the organization's mindsets are far tougher than even the new people. Imagine a group of new people are hired, and over a period of time, they become very unconsciously, and we induct them bloody well. And so we induct them into the existing mindsets. On the other hand, what we've seen is that when gravity is broken through, the same people have made the orbit shift happen. In fact, across these years, the one thing which stands out is that the same people led the transformation. It didn't take a change of teams. So this is a fanciful theoretical question, more or less, that it takes a change of people. What all this is trying to put together is the 6 myths that need to be busted, and through which we can re-architect an organization which can actually transform. And I would urge you to think that the same principles can be applied to leapfrog the development curve of a nation too. Thank you very much. And I'm going to leave you with just one thought. It's all about creating and not following history. Thank you.